Shir today is dedicated in the schus of Menachem Mendel ben Rezel, Hatzlacha, Begashmis, Beruchnis, without any Achmas Nefesh. We begin today the Gemara on Daf, Ayin Hey, Amud Beis, about 10 or 15 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, where it says, Elo ki aser Ravin. So the Gemara here is explaining what Rab Elazar said in the Mishnah, that a Kuti is not allowed to marry a Kutis. The Kutim are this nation that came to Eretz Yisrael and they were Megayer, and as we had before in the Gemara again here we'll discuss the machlokes of whether they're good Gerim, Geri Emes, or Geri Aroyes. They were only Megayer because they were afraid of the lions that were attacking them, and they're really not Gerim. So when Rabbi Elazar says that a Kuti is not allowed to marry a Kutis, the Gemara asks, why not? If they're Yidden, if they're good Gerim, they should be allowed to marry each other. If they're not, they're Goyim. They should also be allowed to sure, the Stam Goyim, they can marry each other. What's this Inyan that there's a suffix here that they can't marry each other? So the Gemara tried a few Hesbedim before, and here the Gemara brings a new pshat. Elo ki yaser Ravin, Omer Rab Chia bar Abba. Ravin came, he said, in the name of Rab Chia bar Abba, Omer Rab Yechanan, in the name of Rab Yechanan. V'amri la, others say, Omer Rab Abba bar Zavde, Omer Rab Chanina, or V'amri la, another version that said, who said this? Omer Rab Yaakov bar Idi, Omer Rab Yeshua ben Levi. That it was said in the name of Rab Yeshua ben Levi. And here he brings three different opinions regarding what the status of the Kutim are. And it's the third opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar of our Mishnah, that there's a suffix, that a Kuti is not allowed to marry a Kutis. Shalosh machlokes bedavar. There are three opinions about this matter. Rabbi Shmuel Savar, if you want to have a plain Gemara, it's on the top shelf on the left. Rabbi Shmuel Savar, Rabbi Shmuel's opinion is Kutim Geri Aroyesein. Kutim are Gedim that were not real Gedim. They were only Megayer because lions attacked them. So they're really Goyim. And also, Kayanim Shenitmu Behem. The Gemara is going to bring a pasuk in a second that they brought Kayanim. These Kutim built their own Beis HaMikdash in Shomrain, and they had Kayanim that they brought there from Mizbeach. The Kainim that got mixed in together with them, that got married to them, what kind of Kainim were these? Kainim Psulim Hayu. These were Pasal Kainim. They were Kainim, they were Chalalim, they were Pasal, so they went over there to the Kutim. Shanema, as the Pasuk says, Vayasalahem Miktsaisam Kayane Bamais. That they had Miktsaisam of the Kainim that made Bamais, and they brought Karbanis there. What does this expression of Miktsaisam Kayane Bamais mean? V'amar Abba Babachana, Amar Rab Yechanan, Min HaKaitzim Sheba'am. From those that are kaitzim, like thorns, which are puzzle, those are the kinds of kainim that went together with the kutim. So therefore, this is the first opinion here, which is Rabbi Shmuel. So the Gemara explains, and therefore the kutim are possible to get married into Klal Yisrael. And both because the kutim themselves are geri arayas, they're goyim, and also the kainim that got mixed in with them, these were puzzle kainim. Another opinion area is Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva Savar Kutim Geri Emesein. The Kutim are proper Gedim. The Kainim Shenitmu Bam, and the Kainim that got assimilated, they got mixed in together with them. Kainim Ksherim Hayu. Actually, these Kainim that went there with the Kutim, they were kosher Kainim. And he teaches the same pasuk we just quoted differently. Shenem Avayasalem Miktsaisam Kaine Bamis. That Miktsaisam Kaine Bamis, that there were the Kainim that made Bamis over there with the Kutim. What does this mean? V'amar Abba Babachan Amar Rab Yechanan Min HaBechirim Sheba'am. Miktsaisam over here means from those few chosen ones, from the Kainim that were kosher. They were the ones that went there with the Kutim. So if so, according to Rabbi Kiva, if they're good Gedim, and the Kainim that were with them were kosher, if they ma'asadim, why are they also to marry into Klal Yisrael the Kutim? The answer is Mipnei Shayu Miyavmim Esa'arusais, because regarding the halacha of Yibum, they did not teach the pasuk the way you're supposed to understand the pasuk. They would say that the mitzvah of Yibum only applies to a woman that's an arusa, that's married the first stage of marriage. She's not yet living with her husband, and her husband died without any children. Only then the mitzvah of Yibum applies. O paiterim is anasuais. And they said that if you're already fully married, and then your husband died, you don't need any Yibum, no chalitzi, you can go get married to whoever you want. Now, my Darshi, why did they say that this is the mitzvah of Yibum, different than the way Chazal taught us what the mitzvah of Yibum is? So basically, what we see here is these Kutim didn't teach the Psukim of Torah always the way Chazal taught. They taught in their own way. Or in the first line of Daf Ayin Vav, Amar Aleph. They taught the Pasuk, Le'siyah eshes samei sachutza le'ish zar. That when a man dies without children, so the wife is not allowed to go get married to anybody. That's the type of the pasuk, right? So how did they teach this? They translated, you have to read together, Leisia Eishes Hameis Hachutza. What does Hachutza here mean? If it's an Arusa, she's living alone outside, not together with her husband. She's already an Eishes Ish, but she doesn't yet live with her husband. So then she's the one that if her husband died without any children, she's not allowed to get married to anybody else without chalitza. But once she's fully married and she's living with her husband, so she doesn't sit outside, so she is allowed to get married to someone else without any chalitza. That's how they touch the pasuk. So now, what ends up happening because of this? They end up getting married to someone without chalitza. Basically, having a relation with someone which is an isser of a lav, because there's an isser of loisi eishes emes achutza right here. This is the pasuk which is a lav, and they're interpreting this lav not the way he's supposed to. So therefore, the Gemara explains why then do they, because they were over on a lav, why do their children become asra to marry into Klal Yisrael? Because Rabbi Akiva l'taimei the Omar, Rabbi Akiva is following his reasoning that he always says yesh mamzer mechayve lavin. That when you have a child that's born from a relationship which is only a isalav, even if it's not a isakaris, the child born is a mamzer. So therefore, because we know that this happened amongst the kutim, so therefore Chachamim said that you can't marry the kutim. There's a suffix that there might be a child that's born from a isalav. Third opinion here, and this is the opinion that will fit with what Rabbi Lazar said, that a kuti is not allowed to marry a kutis because there's a suffix. Yesh oimrim, others say lefisha aim bikin b'diktuke mitzvahs. The kutim, even if they are Geirei Emes, but nevertheless they asked them to marry into Klal Yisrael because they're not baki in the Tukei mitzvahs. There could be a situation where there's a woman that they give a get, but they don't give the get properly, and yet they think that this woman is not a Eishes Ish anymore, but really she is. And now this woman gets married to someone else, and the child will be a mamzer because they're not baki the Tukei mitzvahs. So it could be a child by the kutim will be a mamzer. Now this pointed, the Gemara says that the not bekim b'diktuke mitzvahs explains why Rabbi Lazar says that even amongst the kutim themselves, a kuti should not marry a kutis, because could be the kuti is a descendant from a kuti that was baki, that did do things properly and he's kosher, and the kutis could be a descendant from someone that's a mamzer because maybe her mother was an eishes ish because they didn't give a proper get and not baki. So amongst the kutim themselves, there's a suffix. So therefore, Rabbi Lazar said they can't marry each other. Gemara brings the source where Rabbi Lazar said this. Amar Avidi Baravin, Rabbi Lazar, this yesh oimrim. Oh, sorry, I missed a few words. The Gemara said before, man yesh oimrim. Who's this yesh oimrim? Amar Avidi Baravin, Rabbi Lazar. This is Rabbi Lazar. The Tanya, as we learned in Braise, matzah's kuti. Can you eat the matzah that a kuti baked? So the Tanna Kamir says, yeah, muteres. First of all, it's mutter, meaning we're not concerned that it's chametz in order to have matzah. So the first thing is you have to make sure that it's not chametz. They know the halachas to make sure that it's not chametz. And also, it could also be used for the mitzvah, the first night of Pesach. You can be sure that they did it properly. Rashi brings one of the things about the matzah's mitzvah is that it has to be shimur l'shem mitzvah. You have to make sure that you're baking it, and the shimur is l'shem mitzvah's matzah. They know all these halachas, and therefore you can eat their matzah. Taisus over here adds a detail to this, that this is only if the matzah is being baked in the house of a yid. The kuti baked it, but he's baking it in the house of a yid. Otherwise, Taisus brings from a Gemara that says, or from a Pirkei that Rabbi Lazar actually, that says that the matzah that a kuti, or any bread that a kuti bakes on his own, you're not allowed to eat from it. Rabbi Lazar says you can't eat the matzah from a kuti l'fishein b'kiyim b'diktukim mitzvahs, because they're not baki in the details of a mitzvah. So they might be trying to bake the matzah properly, but you can't trust it if it's chametz or not. You can't know that it was made properly l'shem mitzvah. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, Kol mitzvah shechziku ba kutim. If there's a mitzvah that we know that the kutim are fulfilling it, harbe medaktikim ba yaise mi Yisrael. They're medaktik in those mitzvahs even more than Yidden. They're very, very particular to do the mitzvahs properly. There are such mitzvahs that they're not careful with, but those that they are careful with, they're medaktik more than Yidden. So now the Gemara explains how this applies over here regarding the yichus and the marriage and so on. Ve'ela hacha mai ein b'kiyin. Over here, when we're saying that the kutim, that they're not baki in the kedukim of the mitzvahs, how does that matter regarding marriage? If you say ein b'kiyin, it is Kidushin v'Kidushin. They don't know all the particular halachas of Kidushin and Kidushin. So there's a woman that gets married and they think they did the Kidushin properly, and really it's not a Kidushin. There could be a woman that got a get, they think it's a get, it's really not a good get. So it ends up with issues of Eishes Ish. So therefore, there's a suffix in Kutim of a psul. Another pshat the Gemara brings for this, what the suffix by Kutim is, Omer Rav Nachman, Omer Abba Baravua, that we know what happened, that Mamzer Me'achaisai, there was a Mamzer that was born by the Kutim because of relationship of a person to his sister, or a Mamzer Me'eshes Ish, a Mamzer that was born from an Eishes Ach, sorry, a Mamzer from an Eishes Ach, from a person that married his brother's wife. Nisarvo behen. It was mixed into the kutim. So therefore, a kuti can't marry a kutis because maybe this kutis comes from this mixture of these mamzerim. So the Gemara explains, my kamash malon. What was Rav Nachman Omer Abba Baravu saying over here by this? Yesh mamzer mechai v'krisis. He wants to tell you that they were over on an isser of marrying someone that's a isser kares, and therefore there's a mixture of mamzerim amongst them. That's what he's trying to say basically. If so, nis nichada. He can give one example. Whether someone married his sister or someone married his brother's wife. Why is he giving these two examples? Is there any chiddush in the two examples that he gave? So the Gemara says, no, there is really no chiddush in two examples, but ma'aser shaya kachaya. He's telling you the facts of what happened, that amongst the kutim, both of these isurim took place, and therefore it was mixed into the kutim, and therefore there's a suffix here. Another pshat the Gemara says what the suffix amongst the kutim is, v'rava omar, eved v'shivcha nis'arvu behen. There was an eved, the eved Kanani, that married a kutis, and there was a shivcha that married a kuti, and that was mixed into the nation of the kutim, and therefore a kuti can't marry a kutis because of the suffix. So Gemara now explains again here, why does Rava say both of these points, the eved and the shivcha? Isura mishumai. What's the issue of the isur over here? Mishum shivcha. The problem over here would be the fact that the shivcha married a kuti. When an eved marries a kutis, that wouldn't be a problem, because if the father is a guy and the mother is a yid, we already learned before, that then what does the yichus go according to? The mother. So then the child that's born would not be a mamzer, the child would be kosher, or wouldn't even be possible. So why is Rava mentioning over here a eved? The main point is the fact that a shivcha kananis got mixed into the kutim. So now the mother, the child that's born, goes after the yichus of the mother. Nisnichade should just say that the shivcha is the issue here that mixed in. So the Gemara again says, you're right, the issue is only the shivcha, but ma'aser shahaya kachaya. The story was that an eved kanani and a shivcha got mixed into the kutim, and that's what Rav is mentioning here that happened. Zok Teilige Mishneh hanoise isha. A person, isha kehenes, a person is coming to marry a woman, and this woman is a kehenes. So this, according to Rashi, it's mashma. This is how many mefarshim learn this. We're talking here about a kohen that's coming to marry a kehenes. And a kohen has to be very careful who he marries. So he's coming to marry a kehenes. He has to, here the Mishnah will say, how he has to go and make an interrogation to make sure that this woman is kosher. How far up does he have to check her yichus, her lineage, to see this? So the Mishnah, he has to check into the matter after her yichus. Arba imois, 4 different mothers, or really grandmothers, as we'll see here, shehen shmoina, which really is 8. It's 4 that are really 8. As the Mishnah spells out exactly what you have to look into to see that this woman, this kehenes that you're marrying, is kosher. So first is you have to see ima, who's her mother? Is her mother kosher? And then ve'em ima, her mother's mother. And then you have to see ve'em avi ima, the mother of her father's mother. Eim avi ima. And then ve'ima and her mother. Ve'em avia, and then you have to look into the mother of the father, ve'ima and her mother. And ve'em avi avia. And also the mother of the father's father, ve'ima and her mother as well. Right, so the Mishnah. So here you have four different mothers or grandmothers you have to look into, but their mother as well. So therefore, it's 4, which is really 8. This is b'negaya to a person, a kohen, that's coming to marry a kehenes. The Taisus over here says actually that the main concern by a kohen marrying a kehenes is not only that she may be a descendant of mamzerim, she may be a mamzeres, but the main concern is that also a kohen is not allowed to marry other psulam. A kohen is not allowed to marry a chalolo. So yeah, he has to make sure it's not only the issue of mamzeris. Okay, but there are other Rishonim though that say that this is talking about not only a kohen that's marrying a kehenes, even a Yisrael, and he's inspecting over here to see the yichus that she doesn't come from mamzerim. Okay, this is by a kehenes. Levia v'Yisraelis, if a kohen, or if you're marrying a Levia and you're Yisraelis, so you have to inspect this matter further. You have to look one generation up further. Everything we just said, the 4, and then the mother of those 4, which goes one generation up, which is really 8 different women that you have to look into here in her in her lineage. By a Levi says you have to go one generation up. And the reason for this is because a Kehenes, they're more careful with their yichus. So you don't have to look into the yichus so far. By a Levi of Yisraelis, they're not so careful with their yichus, so you have to look into the matter further. Again?
Cain is married to Levi Yisrael?
Again? Yeah. According to Rashi says that clearly here. Over here Rashi says Kayin, that's coming to marry a Levi and Yisraelis, you have to look one generation up more than if you're marrying a Kehenes. Sagt the Mishnah, Ein Beitkin, Loimena Mizbeach Lamayla. What happens if you look into this and you see that this woman, so her mother's father, or over here in our Rashi we have her father's father, but the others are guided here, her mother's father. He was serving in the Mizbeach. He did the Avodah by the Mizbeach. Once you verify that the grandfather was serving in the Mizbeach, you don't have to check into the matter any further. You know that she's kosher. V'loimena Duchen Lamayla. By a Levia, if her grandfather, or this is actually also a Kain, sorry, again, this is still talking about a Kain, that a Kain that was duchening in the Beis HaMikdash, or actually, sorry, no, it is talking about the Leviim. Rashi here says, the Leviim that go up to the platform to sing. So in a Levia, if her grandfather went up to the platform to sing in the Beis HaMikdash, you don't have to inspect the matter any further. That itself is enough to rely on that she's kosher. And if you're marrying a Yisraelis and you know that her grandfather was part of the Sanhedrin, you for sure know that he's miyuchas, he's kosher, you don't have to look at it anymore. And also, if the grandfather comes from Sheitrei Harabim, or from those judges, or from those people that are paskening Dinei Mominus for Yidden, not just from the Sanhedrin, but Bechlal, from a Bezdin, and from Sheitrim, that take care of money matters for the Yidden, also you know that he's kosher. And the Gabbai Tzedakah, and also from a Gabbai Tzedakah, Masiyan L'Kohona, you could also marry off to a Kayin. The Gemara will explain why that is, what's unique about a Gabbai Tzedakah that we can be sure about his yichus. Ve'ein tzarech livdek acharei. After all these, you don't have to inspect the matter any further. Rabbi Yossi says, Af mishahaya chasum eid, when you have someone that was signed as a witness, be'erkei ha'yishana, in the documents of this Bezdin, in a city called Yishana shal Tzipayri, that was near Tzipayri. One is going to explain over there in that city, they were very particular regarding the eidim that they signed, they interrogated to make sure that it is a miyuchas. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignas saime, Af mishaya muchtiv ba'astratya shal melech. Also someone that was written in the list of the soldiers of the king, so that is also a sign that he's kosher, because they only had people that are miyuchas there. Gemara will explain why that is.
So they checked the men and the women.
No. Let's see the Gemara now. Sagt the Gemara, Maishna benoshi bat kinon. Why is the Mishnah saying that when you're coming to look into yichus, what do you look into? You only look into the grandmother, the great-grandmother, the great-great-grandmother. But we don't look into the lineage from the father's side, from the grandfathers. So, regarding the father, the grandfather, that we don't look into b'chlal. No. The Mishnah said that you look at it. Huh? No. Over there, the Mishnah is saying that once you know that the father served in the Beis HaMikdash, so then we know that it's miyuchas. But over there, that's only, I mentioned, if since you have to look into the mother, so that's only going to be the father's mother, the mother's father. If the mother's father served in the Mizbeach, so then you know that this mother is miyuchas. Then you don't have to look any further. But the ikir yichus that we're trying to interrogate and figure out over here is all in the mothers. The yichus of the mother, not the yichus of the father. Why is that? Says the Gemara as follows. Nashi, when it comes to women, the chimin sebadi adadi, when they get into quarrels with one another, ba'arayis of the minsi, and one screams in the other, and they're offending each other. What do they scream at each other? They scream at each other, ba'arayis. What that means is, one says to the other, you did this avera, you did that avera, you don't tell me this, and so on. That's how they speak to one another. So therefore, if there's some issue with the yichus of these women, that's not something that they speak about with each other. That's not something that they scream at one another. So if there's an issue with the yichus, there's not necessarily is there any rumor about this. It's something that it's covered up. So therefore, this is something that we have to look into. Gavri, when it comes to men, when they're fighting with one another, so when they scream at one another, what happens? So one screams at the other, you come from a not kosher, you're a apostle, you're a mamzer. So that's something that they speak about. So if there's an issue with the yichus, it's the color. This is something that there's a rumor about this, it's going to come out. So it's not necessary to make this interrogation. Now the Gemara addresses another question. The Mishnah here is all saying a kohen that's coming to marry a kohenes, so he has to investigate whether his wife has good yichus. How about the other way around? Does she have to investigate his yichus if she wants to marry him? If she wants to marry him, why doesn't she have to check into his yichus to make sure that he's kosher and he doesn't come from mamzerim or whatever? Says the Gemara, what our Mishnah is saying here proves what Rav said. That even kayanais, that are ksheidais, there's no issue. They're allowed to marry a person that's possible. They're allowed to marry someone which is a chalal, a ger, so on. All those limitations that there are for kayanim is only for a kayan, not for a kehenes. So Rashi here says, what's with the issue of mamzerus? So Rashi says, once we see that the Torah wasn't machmir when it get to a chalal and so on, when it get to a kehenes, so chachamim also, this whole thing here is that takanas chachamim, so the chachamim were machmir when it get to mamzeris either, that a woman that marries a man, she doesn't have to look into the yichus of the man. Only the man has to look into the yichus of the woman. Because we see that the Torah was more machmir regarding the zachar.
She becomes a halal if she marries a halal.
And a chanami. Again? Lo yehuzuru, correct. Lo yehuzuru, there's no issa for her to marry to marry someone which is possible. Ravada barav tani, Ravada barav Torah nabraise, dalid imois shem shtem esrei. He said that when you have to look into the yichus, you're looking into the mothers or the grandmothers, which are 4, which really, it's not 4, but it's 12. Because you're not only looking into those mothers or grandmothers, but there's another 8, which ends up being 12. That's how we talk in the Braisa. The Masnita Tana, in another Braisa, we learned Dalad Imois, you're looking into 4 different generations here of mothers, grandmothers, Shem Sheish Esrei. But you have to really look further generations up, which ends up being 16 different grandmothers to make sure that she's kosher. So the Gemara now explains what the pshat of the version of these braises here is. It's understood what Rav Ada Barave taught here. Maikim la belevia o bas Yisrael. So what the brayse is saying is regarding a Levi and a bas Yisrael, like it said in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said that you have to, by a kohenes, you look into 4 women and you also look into their mother, which ends up being 8. Then the Mishnah said by a Levi and Yisrael, you have to look into 1 generation up, which is another 4. So it's 4, which ends up being with another 8, which is 12. So that makes sense. Elamasnita, the Braisa says that you'll have to look into 16 different women in the generations going up. Name a pliga. It seems like this argues with our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that you only have to go so far, which ends up being only 12 women, not 16. So the Gemara says, Loi, it's not necessarily a machlokes here. My oid achas. When our Mishnah says that by a Leviah and in a Yisraelis, you have to go up 1 generation, not only the 8 different women that you have to look into by a Kehenes, by a Leviah Yisraelis, you go 1 generation up. It doesn't mean 1 generation up. It meant zug achas. You have to go another 2 generations up. By a Kehenes, the Mishnah explains the peer of what you have to look into, a grandmother and her mother. And then when it says by a Levi, it says you have to go up, it means you have to go up another 2 generations, just like by Kehenes. You're looking into two generations. By a Levi, it says you go up another 2 generations, so that ends up being double, ends up being 16 that you have to look into. The whole thing that it said here in the Mishnah, that when you're getting married to a woman, you have to interrogate and look into the yichus. This is all Rav Meir's opinion. Chachamim disagree. They say, Kol mishpachas b'cheskas kashrus einaim. All of the families have a chazaka of kashrus, unless we know that there's any issue. If you don't know of an issue, all mishpachas have a cheskas kashrus. There's a status of kashrus. You don't have to look into this. The Gemara, is this true that Rav said this? But v'omer Rav Chama bar Gurya, Omer Rav, Mishnah Seinu. Our Mishnah that says that you have to look into yichus, when is that? So he said you don't always have to look into yichus. It's keshekaina olav arar. When there was a irur, when there was a rumor about this, Rashi says the rumor means there were 2 Eidim that was saying that we heard there's a problem. So these 2 Eidim don't know for a fact, but there's 2 Eidim saying that we heard there's a problem. That's called a irur. In such a case, you have to look into the yichus. That's what our Mishnah was talking about. So the question of the Gemara is, if Rav is saying that our Mishnah is in a case where there are 2 Eidim that are saying that there's a problem here, how would Chachamim argue and say that in such a case you don't have to look into the yichus? It's obvious that Chachamim would agree that in such a case, 2 Eidim are saying there's a problem that you should have to look into it. So the Gemara says, you're right, man de masniha le masniha. These are 2 different Amiroim that said something in the name of Rav. The one that heard this did not hear that. There's 2 different opinions here in what Rav said. Ikadamri, there are others though that said it, put it together. And they said as follows. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav regarding our Mishnah, Zu Divrei Rab Meir. Rab Meir is the one that said you have to look into the yichus. Chachamim said, Kol mishpachis b'cheskas kashrus ein days. All families have a cheskas kashrus and you don't have to look into the yichus. And on this, but im kaira olav aror, if there is a challenge, there's an error here on this family, then tzadik live kachrel. Then even Chachamim will agree that you have to look into the matter and see if where this woman comes from. So even Chachamim agree that you would have to look into it when there's an error here. Okay, it said weiter in the Mishnah, ein boitgid min ha-mizbeach l'mayla, that if you see that a kohen served in the mizbeach, that itself is a sign that he's kosher. You don't have to interrogate the matter any further. So the Gemara my time, what's the reason? Ilav de botkua, if not for the fact that they were boidikim, they saw that he's kosher, le'av maskulate. They wouldn't allow him to go serve in the Beis HaMikdash by the mizbeach. So this is the sign that he's kosher. Also the Leviim that go onto the platform to sing, so that's also a sign they're kosher. My time, the master said, that they had over there a Sanhedrin. They would check into the yichus of the Kohanim and the Leviim to make sure that they're kosher. The Lishkas Agazes, they would check into this all the time to see that no one that's puzzled should come there and serve in the Beis HaMikdash and sing there. So a Levi that's singing in the Beis HaMikdash, you know he's kosher. In Sanhedrin also, you know that he's kosher. Why? My time. How do you know that someone of the Sanhedrin must be a kosher yid? Maybe a mamzer could be part of the Sanhedrin as well. The Tanur of Yosef, kishem shebezdin menukim b'tzedek, just like a bezdin is clean and is justice, kach menukim mikol mum. So too, anybody that's part of the Sanhedrin cannot have any blemish. Oma Mereimer. So Mereimer said, my kara, where's the pasuk that everybody in the Sanhedrin has to be kosher? The pasuk says, "Kulach yafe rayasi umum ein bach." That my rayasi is all completely pure. And this is a pasuk that's darshan on the Sanhedrin. And there's no mum, has no blemish, meaning that this is kosher. How do you know this means kashrus, that is not a mamzer? Eime mum mamish. Maybe it means that someone that is in Sanhedrin doesn't physically have any blemish. Amar Ravacha by Yaakov, Amar Kra, the pasuk says by Moshe Rabbeinu, V'syatzvu sham imach, that you gather from the 70 Zekanim and they'll be together with you. And what does imach mean? Imach b'daimim lach, that they'll be with you, they'll be like you. So the Gemara asks, but how do you know that's talking about judging the Yid in Sanhedrin? V'dilma mishum shchina, over there it's speaking about that they're going to be together with Moshe Rabbeinu. They'll have a level of nevuah like Moshe Rabbeinu, so maybe that's why they have to be kosher. But maybe by Sanhedrin you don't have to be kosher. Rav Nachman or Makra, the pasuk says, and this is in Parshas Yisrael, where Moshe Rabbeinu brings from the Sarei Alafim, Sarei Meis, to the judges that should help him judge Yidden, and it says, "V'hakel me alecha v'nasu itach," that they'll carry the Yidden to judge Yidden. Itach, what does it mean? B'daimim lach, that the ones that are judging the Yidden should be similar to Moshe Rabbeinu, they have to be kosher like Moshe Rabbeinu. So from here you see that it's, someone in the Sanhedrin has to be kosher. Then the Mishnah said, somebody that his grandfather is from Shaitrei Arabim, he judges Yidden in matters of money matters, so we know that he's kosher. Shall we say, we see over here that you can't have someone which is puzzle judging Yidden in money matters, but I'll ask you from what it says in the Braise, everybody could paskin dine maminis, but ve'en hakol Ksheira and Lodin din nefashis. Not everybody could paskin din nefashis. V'havinon ba. And the question was asked, Hakoil, this expression of the Mishnah, Hakoil asuya mai, what is it coming to add? Amar Yud asuya mamzer. Even a Yid is possibly is a mamzer, could also judge Yid in din maminis. Sakara Mishnah say that if you see someone that was judging din maminis, we know that it's kosher. Amar Abaye said B'Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, they were makbid that the one that judges din maminis should be kosher. When he taught the Braises regarding the Masechta Kidushin, and here there's halachas of Yuchsin, he said Yerushalayim. Then Yerushalayim, there was only someone that was kosher. They allowed him to be a shaiter to judge din maminis. So that's why that verifies that he's kosher. The Gabbai Tzedakah Masiin, if you see that he was a Gabbai Tzedakah, you can marry his grandchildren. What's the reason? Why do we know a Gabbai Tzedakah is kosher? My time, the reason is, Kivin the Minzi Bahadi Inshi. These Gabbai Tzedakah, they go collect money from people, even when they have to force people to give their dues that they owe for Tzedakah. So they get into tough situations with people. The Omar Mars, the master has said, Memashkinen ala Tzedakah, when you collect Tzedakah, the dues that a person owes, so you can even take a collateral for this. Even when you're coming in out of Shabbos and a person is busy and he's running and you're coming in and the Gabbai is bothering him to give him the tzedakah. So if there's any issue that with his yichos, islay kala, there would be a rumor about this because he gets into fights with people and people would scream at him, oh, you have no yichos. So therefore, this is something that we know about. So if we don't hear of any issue with this Gabbai tzedakah, we can be sure that he's kosher. The Gemara brings an incident about the union of Yichus. The Rav Ada Barave, the host of Rav Ada Barave, where he was staying, Giyura Have. So he was a ger. So as we'll see in the continuation of the Gemara, he wasn't mamish a ger. His father was a guy. His father was a ger, but his mother was a yid. Now this individual, he had a fight with Rabbevai. Maromar anavid nisarusa. So one of them, Rav Beve, said, I want to take care of matters in the city. I'm going to be appointed to take care of everything. And this host, the other one, said, no, I want to be the one to take care of matters in the city. So Asla Kamed Rav Yosef. So they came to Rav Yosef to tell them who's the one that has the right. Amalur Rav Yosef said as follows: Tanini, we learned in the Braisa, Saim Tasim Alecha Melech Mikerev Achacha. You appoint a king. The king should be appointed only from amongst Yidden, which means Kol Mesimis Shatem Mesim. Anytime you appoint, not just for a king, any position of authority, Le'yel Mikerev Achacha should be from amongst your brothers. So therefore, he was saying you come from Gadim, so you can't be appointed as in a position of authority. Rabbeva is going to be appointed. Amalei Rav Ada Barave. So Rav Ada Barave stuck up for his host. He said, does that mean even if his mother is a yid, he can't be appointed for a position of authority? So as I mentioned, this person, his mother was a yid. So even though his father it was a ger, but if his mother is a yid, he says he's a regular yid, so shouldn't be able to be appointed. Amalei, so Rav Yosef said, if his mother comes from Yidden, so then we can say that, he's Karev Achacha, he's considered to be a Achacha in Klal Yisrael, and he could be appointed a position of authority. So Hilkach, so what Rav Ada Barave said, Rav Bevoy, the Gavre Rabahu, Rav Bevoy is a big Talmid Chacham, he's a great individual, Lion B'mili D'Shmaya. Let him take care of heavenly matters. In other words, issues of tzedakah and all other things that relate to and the shul things. But then he says to his host, La'ayim b'mili d'masa. You'll take care of the other areas in the city, other things, other matters in the city that relate to gashmias things in the city. Abaya said about this incident, Hilkach man de mashri tzorbe mit rabbanim b'shpezichne le'ashri. Someone that brings a Talmid Chacham to be a guest by him, so it's going to be good for him. Like you see over here, Rav Ada Barave, he took care of his host. He supported his host that he should be able to become appointed to a certain position of authority. Rav Ada Barave, Rav Ada Barave here knew how to defend his host that wanted to be appointed to a position of authority. Rab Zeire would also take care of people that came from Gadim, and he allowed them to be appointed to a position of authority. Rabbi Baravu as well, he allowed people that come from Gadim to be appointed in a position of authority. But the Marave in the west, which is in Eretz Yisrael, even just to be in a position of authority to take care of Kuri. Kuri is a position to measure different things in the fields outside. A cord is a certain measurement. They wouldn't appoint him to such a position. But in Erda as well, even to be someone he has the authority to take care of when you give the water for the fields, they also wouldn't appoint him to such a position. The next thing he said in the Mishnah was that when you have someone that's written into these documents in this city Yeshana that's near Tzipayri, that's a raya that he has a good yichus. My time, what's the reason for this? Because over there in that city, they would be very particular before they allowed a person to sign to make sure that this person is kosher. The last point it said in the Mishnah, when you have those people that are listed in the army of the king to fight as a soldier, you know that he's kosher. What is the Mishnah talking about? If if he was enlisted in the army of Beis David to fight by David HaMelech, because David HaMelech only had Yidden fighting in his army that were kosher. Amar Rav Yosef Maikra, what's the source of this? Because the pasuk says there regarding these people that fought by David HaMelech, v'hisyachsam b'tzava b'milchama, that they had their yichus in their army to fight in the war. So we see they had the miyuchas. So the time in my, what's the reason for this? That he only took soldiers that are miyuchas. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, kadei shtei schusan is schus avosem misayatan. So their schus and the schus of their ancestors that they kept their yichus should help them in the war to fight to be victorious. But the Gemara asks on this, but we see different psukim. The Gemara is going to bring a bunch of different psukim that we see that there were psulim in the army by David HaMelech. V'ha'eke, we find in the pasuk it says that there was an individual by the name of Tzelek HaAmayni. My love, don't you think, what does this mean? The Asim HaAmayn, that he came from Amayn. So he wasn't Miyuchas. So the Gemara's answer is no, Loi, the Yosef Ba'amayn. He was living in Amayn, but he was a Yid that was a Miyuchas. In the Gemara, we find another thing. Vayeka Uriah Chiti. Uriah came from Chitim, also a ger from not a place that's not kosher. My love, the Asim B'cheis. Says the Gemara, Loi, the Yosef B'cheis. He lived over there. But then we have another pasuk where it says that there was an individual by the name of Itai Hagiti. Now, here the Gemara says, if you'll try to answer here as well, the Yosef Begas, it's just that he lived there, but he doesn't come from the Gittim, but that can't be. Because Rav Nachman said about this individual, Itai Agiti ba ubitla. He came and took Avodah Zarah that the Gittim established, and he nullified that Avodah Zarah. Now, the halacha regarding Avodah Zarah, when you establish an object to be Avodah Zarah, in order to nullify that status of Avodah Zarah, only the guy that made that Avodah Zarah could nullify that. A Yid can't do that. So if he nullified this Avodah Zarah, it must be that he came from the Chittim. So we see that in the army of David HaMelech, there were people that didn't have the yichus, they came from Chittim. David HaMelech had 400 youngsters that were in his army. And who were they? They were children of a Yefastaya. The Yefastaya is the woman that's brought into war, and she's Megayer, and then the person can marry her. And also the kula mistaprim kumi. These were all individuals that would cut their hair in the front. They would cut their hair, and megadlim blightus, and they would leave their hair grow long like a ponytail. And the kulam yeshvim bekroni yishalzav, and they would sit in these golden chariots. Vayimahalchem berashe gaisais, and they would go ahead of all the army. And the hein bali agrefin shel Beis David, and they were the very mighty soldiers of the house of David. And these, who were they? They weren't people that had a good yichus. They came from Bnei Yefas Tayar. So how can we say that in the army of David HaMelech, who was enlisted, only the soldiers that are kosher? And says the Gemara, the Ozli L'Biyusi Ba'alma. These youngsters that it says that went in the army of David HaMelech and they went ahead of the soldiers, they went just ahead to throw fear on the enemy, but they didn't actually fight. The ones that actually fought and were victorious were those that were enlisted and were soldiers, and they were 100% kosher.